Wisconsin Madison. Recording this session, so for those of you on Zoom, just maybe, I don't know, something to be aware of. We are so delighted with this inaugural online version of our revenue model and funds development series. This was, of course, an outcropping or a 2.0 of our legacy conference, Fundraising and Development for Nonprofits, which was founded by Mr. Don Gray, who's actually here with us today. The pandemic and other things made us want to kind of refresh that conference, and we've brought forth some of the best of that conference and its faculty members, and added in some new components, and we hope that those of you that have been here for the series have been enjoying it as much as we have. Today, we're going to get the really lovely opportunity to build upon some of the previous sessions and the learning that we've done there, to hear from practitioners, experts that are actually doing this work out in the field. And our advisory board member and friend, Steve Goldberg, also himself a longtime professional in the field, is going to be facilitating this discussion with our three panelists. So I'm going to get to sit back and just enjoy this with the rest of you, and we'll pop back when we're doing Q&A. A quick outline of where we're going. We'll have about an hour for the discussion. We will then have Q&A, and then we'll make a few closing announcements at the end. So thank you to our panelists and Steve, and I'll let you do all the other intros and discussion from here, Steve.
Thank you, Mary Beth. We're ready to get going. Thanks everybody for joining us. And I want to let you know that we've gathered three professionals in the community partner field, previously known as the nonprofit field. And each of them has some great best practices and ideas and tactics to share with you in terms of fund development. And the purpose of this panel is to try to glean from those ideas some thoughts and tactics that you can use in your own organization. So that's our goal. Our advice is not to copy any of these, but to adapt and customize and maybe use them to trigger some thoughts of your own for your organization. And as Mary Beth indicated, we'll go through the panel session, including the panelists answering some questions I'll be asking them, and then you'll have a chance to ask them questions through the chat. And I'm encouraging the panelists to ask each other questions because they're interactive by nature, and this will be a nice result of the panel. So on my right, your left, is Jeff Burkhart, who's Executive Director of the Literacy Network. And on my left, your right, is Jenny Jeffress, who is Executive Director of the Madison Public Library Foundation for another few months. And Dani Luckett is sitting next to her. She is the Chief Development Officer for the Goodman Community Center. So three great organizations, three wonderful community leaders, and an opportunity for them to share thoughts and ideas and best practices with all of you. So Jeff, I'm going to start with you. This question is no surprise. I'm sure you get it very often. And that is, tell everybody what the Literacy Network does. How do you add value to the community? And what approach do you use in fund development? You have about 2 minutes.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So Literacy Network, for those of you who are not familiar with what we do, we work with adult learners who are working on their English reading and writing skills, as well as folks who are working on getting a high school diploma or a GED. And I'm working on their reading and writing skills, but are native speakers. So we have a pretty broad array of students and a variety of goals. And one of the things I think that we really excel at is meeting people where they are, identifying a specific goal, and then doing individual work that's necessary to get to that goal. So some of the areas that we focus on in terms of fund development, one of the early things that we did, Steve, you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, was to really work on something that was a little bit unexpected, which was how we can help adults interact with the healthcare system. And we developed an English for Health program out of that in collaboration with Access Community Health Center, with St. Mary's Hospital, with UW Health, and a couple other partners, and developed a lot of lessons around that. And that was one of the areas that we started to really see some traction, and it was a real need for our students. They had identified that they were very nervous about talking to their doctor or nurse in the healthcare setting. And so it was a real need for them. And it was also, from the healthcare system's perspective, a need for them to really grow. Since then, we've developed a lot of different lesson plans that we're able to integrate into our English classes, that are our public classes that are available. And we have also in the last year developed a lot of lessons around vaccine education, because we found that there was a lot of resistance initially to get a vaccine. But after we provided some education, a lot of our students decided that they would become vaccinated. And so that was, I think, another value add that we had in the community.
So speaking of value add, help us understand how literacy adds value to a family or an individual. A lot of us funders back in the day thought that literacy was a nice to have. you
Right,
know,
right.
And now it's a tool and it provides access. Could you help us understand how literacy helps families and individuals access things that many of us take for granted?
Yeah, so we've used some stats, both locally and nationally, to identify the specific things that people are able to do. One of the national things that we've used, there was a longitudinal study that was done in Portland, Oregon, that demonstrated over a 10-year period, looking at a cohort of adult learners. All of them had not finished high school initially. And they looked at the control group who did not participate in adult education, and then the folks who did participate. And what they found was that over that 10-year period, income increased for students in adult education programs by more than $10,000 each year. But that didn't come in the first year, of course. It came in, starting in year 5 or 6. But they found that had a really strong impact. What that told us was, and something that we kind of already see on a more anecdotal level with our students, is that there's a really significant increase in people's ability to support their families with additional literacy skills. But it does take time, and it's an investment. So we look at that study, and then we use real stories from our students, and we can demonstrate that very clearly from one student to the next, that they're, when they start with us, they have this goal, they start to work towards it, and then once they achieve it, then their world really opens up. And we have several stories like that where we can demonstrate that.
Yeah, well, we'll circle back on some of those stories. I like the fact that you help your donors understand that thanks to them, thanks to their gifts, Stanley now has a job, or Shirley has health insurance for her children, or Pedro has citizenship, etc. So thanks for sharing that. And the reason that I want to push a little bit and understand more about what the panelists think, the value is that they provide the community, is that's core to your messaging for fund development and donor relations and everything else. We'll come back to that. Jenny, let's talk about the Madison Public Library Foundation and the library in general in terms of value added to the community. Some of it's obvious, but help us understand.
Right. So the Library Foundation exists as a separate 501c3 to support our 9 Madison public libraries. And kind of our, message and kind of mission is building better libraries every day. It's private support coming in that kind of take our libraries from great to fantastic. And that's, our whole responsibility. But I think we see libraries in the community as kind of libraries are for everyone. That is why they're in neighborhoods around town where they are serving people directly in those neighborhoods. That's why we want to build a 10th library on the Far East Side, because it's considered a library desert, because it's very hard for people to get to a library in that community. But libraries just have such a broad range of services that they offer, starting with literacy, but I think building upon many, many, many other things beyond literacy in the ways they serve communities. I was actually just at a presentation, maybe it was last week at Tempo, and a UW law professor had come up with an app that was serving people who had some sort of criminal record to help them get rid of their criminal record. So maybe they were arrested, but they weren't convicted. And how do you get that off? And, my question was like, have you told librarians about that? Because that's, we want to serve the community. And she's like, before I even could, ask the question, she was saying, and we've trained all the people in the 9 libraries here in Madison about this particular app so that they can reach people who, may have a criminal record or may have a driving infraction that they need to get off their record so they can get a job and so forth and so on. So I think that's like a great example of people go to the libraries because they're really good at customer service. So whether it's, detention or whether it's, story times, the range of things that libraries do to kind of serve the community and be a resource to the community are what we try to support with the taxpayer dollars and then with the private dollars that we add to that to kind of take it above and beyond. Another good example of that is we provide a lot of money for technology. Because the city maybe provides like the baseline, but if you need Adobe software, like the foundation has to buy that. But this year we funded a streaming service called Canopy. And so I think for quite a while, people were asking like, couldn't the library get a streaming service? Well, they finally came up with one that we purchased as a library. You put in your library card number and you have access to thousands and thousands of movies and TV shows on this streaming service called Canopy. And we started it in March, and I think we have over 2,300 new subscribers in our system, and over 100,000 things have been watched on Canopy with Madison Public Library card users. So I think it's those like added investments of how we can serve the community even better. So whether it's on their computer watching something, or whether it's working on a criminal record and having librarians be resources to folks in the community.
Yeah, so I like how you're trying to take the idea of libraries and make sure everybody understands libraries are for everyone. But I'm wondering, how do you help everyone understand that, all of your potential funders and supporters, because it is a little bit new, I think, in the local vocabulary. Libraries are more than books. They're access to other things, just like literacy is more than just learning how to read and write. So help us understand how you get that across to your stakeholders.
I think that's a huge challenge, because I think every time I sit down with a library staff member, I find out something new, and I've been there 12 years. So I don't think we always know all of it. I think there's a lot of invention that happens along the way. But I do think we try to find stories that we can tell about patrons and how their lives were affected by their interaction with a library staff member, whether that's inside a library or outside a library. Because I also think over the course of the past 12 years, we've really changed our method of community engagement and are doing a lot more outside the community and in neighborhoods and in parks. I mean, we are here in South Madison, and we did a number of programs over in Penn Park this summer. So I think it's the engagement, whether it's with the community or with donors. I still think it's part of the same message of being in the community and being visible with different things that we're doing. But I think, the library is constantly evolving, and we, even as fundraisers, are trying to keep up with all the different things that the library does in the community. And that's our ongoing challenge. But I think we can tell stories of folks that we've affected and how we've, made something different happen.
Oh, good. So hold that thought, because we're going to come back and find out more about how you're leveraging your, the essence of the library and how the library system delivers so much value. How does that get leveraged with donors, and how does it fill the space in your campaigns and communication? So hang on to that. Dani, it's our turn to hear from you about how the Goodman Community Foundation, or Community Center, I'm sorry, is connecting with the hood, as you call it, on the east side. And the hood has been a very important source of financial support as well as participation, and your brand on that part of town, going all the way back to the days when you were located on Atwood Avenue before you had your new buildings, plural, 2 of them. So what value is the Goodman Community Center offering, and how are you getting that message across in the community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, our mission is to strengthen lives and secure futures. We do that in a number of ways. We serve over 47,000 people.
How many? How many?
47,000 people.
Wow, cool.
Over the course of the year, through a bazillion programs, I like to say. Seriously, we serve ages 3 to 103, because we have programs for young children and all the way through youth to the younger adults. We're actually trying to build out more programs for young adults who just graduated, who are still trying to bridge their way into what is next for them, whether it's a career or college or a community engagement of some type. So we're working to build those programs. We also serve seniors in any number of ways, through exercise classes, bingo, social emotional engagement, like both for all ages is the way I look at it. And so we also have hospitality programs. If anyone's been to Goodman Community Center, you know, it's a beautiful space with a little bit for everyone. So we actually rent space and provide space to different community groups. We have weddings and showers and all kinds of things on a regular basis. So I think in that way, the community participates and plugs in different ways all the time.
It's also a revenue stream, is it not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because COVID put a pretty big damper on that revenue stream, which is, you know, forcing us to reimagine how we do those services and how we can build them back over time. And of course, during that time frame as well, we've had a lot of venues that have come up that are not at the Goodman Center, but are, you know, hotels, the library, they're different things that people can host events at. So it is kind of looking at you know, how to best utilize those spaces and services while also maximizing their revenue. We also have a gym where we host not only exercise classes for the community members, but our youth participate in basketball leagues and all kinds of different things that use our spaces during the day. And of course, during the summer, it's all day programs versus after school programs during the school year. So there's never a dull moment at the Goodman Community Center. And we're very, very fortunate to have a number of people in the neighborhood and across Madison who support the center. We're probably a donor base of like 7,000 plus people. A large number of them that we were able to secure through COVID, you know, that came aboard through COVID when people had extra money in their pocket. A lot of those people were generous and kind and gave those support dollars to us for our food programs. So we did a drive-up food pantry. We have a food pantry year round, but we provided a drive-up service through COVID and pivoted to make all those things happen. And so we still offer that service for the community members that need it and have mobility challenges or other reasons that they can't make it physically into the pantry. But yeah, we're always looking for new ways to support our community too. So, you know, the library is great, been a partner as is Literacy Network and all kinds of organizations that we partner with to make all these things possible.
Now, you have a reputation at Goodman for really knowing your donors, knowing them really, really well. How did that reputation get earned?
Well, I think it is far before my time. I've been at Goodman just under 2 years, or not, I started last May, whatever that, do that. But you know, Becky Steinhoff was with the center for 31 years. So we had a continuity of leadership that was really important. She helped, you know, lead those 2 major campaigns that built those 2 buildings that you mentioned, the Ironworks building and the Brassworks building. We are very fortunate now. She had huge shoes to fill, as you can imagine, but we now have Letitia Nelson, who's just a dynamo, like just incredibly. I thought I was an energetic person until I met Letitia. Like she's
more
really
energetic than you.
But she's just you know, people use the word authentic, but like she's truly, like, she was raised by community builders. You know, her parents were both big community builders in Milwaukee, and she just kind of, you know, she took and absorbed all of what she learned, and it's really just, she's such a, you know, perfect fit for where we are and where we want to go next at Goodman. So I'm really excited to partner with her and be part of it.
Good, good. One more thing for you. I noticed on your website, not only do you say, we strengthen lives and secure futures, ... with your help.
That's right.
Tell us about that. That's a nice tagline. With your help. What are you telling the people who look at your website?
it takes a village.
Yeah.
You know, it absolutely, we could not do it without support from the community and the neighborhood. And of course, all of our participants play a role in figuring out what do we need to be doing next, you know, what's
Mhm.
next. So we take that really seriously and try to engage as much as possible, whether we're evaluating a program and its success, you know, for instance, our youth are very much involved in helping us figure out how we're gonna evaluate their program and whether it's
Mhm.
the right fit for what we're hoping to happen.
Right,
So, yeah, I think that's what it means.
okay. So there's a similar point made on the Madison Public Library Foundation's website. Your gifts allow us to take libraries beyond city funding to a new level of excellence. You help us reach the whole community because libraries are for everyone. So you're also giving a subtle message, but a clear one, I guess, to current and potential financial supporters, that they're helping to make that difference. It's not just not the library doing it on its own.
Right. I mean, I think that's why the foundation was established back in 1993 was, you know, public support couldn't do everything that
Mhm.
they wanted the library to do. So it does take private support to kind of take things to the next level and to be inventive and not just be reacting to where the community is, but to evolve into where the community will be or may want to be. And I think like the bubbler is a great example of that. Like nobody
Explain
said,
the bubbler, explain
yeah,
the
so
bubbler.
nobody said you need to have artists working with the library, either doing exhibits or doing programs with people in a studio. But I think that's the kind of thing where the inventiveness of staff created something that's become an iconic program that is appreciated internationally,
Mhm.
but that needed private funding to get it going. And a lot of times it's the foundation maybe starts something or invests for, you know, a couple years to get something up and running. But now our bubbler staff are paid by the city, but we still fund the artists. So I think it's that kind of collaborative approach to what we can have the city fund and what we can have private sources fund that makes really good things happen
Mhm.
and makes us kind of a leader among libraries and not just a book warehouse.
So when did you see a shift in the paradigm where the public finally said, yeah, we need to support our local libraries because government can't do all of it? Because that's a pretty stiff paradigm.
Yeah, I don't think it was a singular shift. I think it's a long over time, like long-term message. I think we still have people who say that exact same thing, who
Mhm.
say, my tax dollars pay for this. Why would I give to the library?
Mhm.
You know, but they say that about Olbrecht Botanic Garden, or they say that about our city parks. There's many things that are city-funded projects,
Mhm.
but we need private dollars to kind of either renovate or build a facility or kind of take things to the next level. And so I don't think we've eliminated that question, Steve, but I think it's a long process of
Yeah.
conversation with the community about like, well, we can do this basic thing, but if you want, you know, something more, something better, something that shows kind of the creativity of who the people of Madison are, then we're gonna need to bring some private funds in to do that.
Yeah, well, you're clearly making a lot of progress in that regard. Jeff, on your website, the Literacy Network's website, I've learned that you put students at the core of everything you do.
Mhm.
Students at the core of everything you do.
Mhm.
How is that useful in your effort to develop fundraising and financial support?
It's interesting that, you know, a lot of our donors are really drawn in by that message because it's, you know, what I think both Goodman and the libraries are doing is much more broad and more expansive. Whereas what we're doing, I think, is there's only a certain number of people in our community that are, you know, sort of served by what we do.
Mhm.
Yet we have a great outpouring, I think, of support for the work. And so it is very, it's very giving and it's very connecting to people from other cultures, from other places in the world. So I think there is that sort of spirit that I feel like both of the libraries and the Goodman Community Center have, in that we want to come together and support our community. And that's how we've really leveraged that connection. We have so many volunteers in our community who have contributed to the lives of students at Literacy Network. We have a lot of programs. We have programs at many libraries. We've had programs at Goodman before the pandemic. Hopefully we can again someday soon. And the fact that we are able to connect donors to that, having students at the core, I think really speaks a lot about, who we are as a community, that we want to give back. We want to connect with people from other places that we don't know as well. When there were refugee crises over the last couple of months, both in Ukraine and in Afghanistan, people were reaching out to us almost immediately before we even had a chance to figure out if refugees were going to be coming into our community, and saying that we want to work with an Afghani refugee. And that's great. And my message has been, yes, we anticipate that we'll have some refugees from these various areas. But did you know that we currently have refugees from Bhutan and from Iraq? And we can educate. We can use that as an opportunity to talk to our potential donors and volunteers about how we really center what the needs of our students are. And it's been a great journey, and we get very little pushback about serving immigrants in our community. Whereas I think other communities might get pushback about that kind of thing. But I think in Madison, we've been very fortunate to have an inviting and warm community that wants to help people to do better in their lives, no matter where they're from.
Mhm. You mentioned connections with local organizations. I know that you established a connection a while ago with Access Community Health Centers.
Yeah.
And I'd like you to share with everybody how that became more than just a programmatic partnership, but it morphed into something else that affected your bottom line. And that could be
So,
considered fund development
yeah,
in a gradual, slow, deliberate
it was an
way.
unanticipated area of resource acquisition for Literacy Network. So we started this English for Health program. I started in 2008. We started the program in 2009, and we saw that there was a community need and a real interest in helping our community to build health skills, communication skills in healthcare. So we started this partnership, and St. Mary's Hospital was really one of the first organizations that invited us to come in and do classes in the hospital. I had worked at a hospital, and so I was kind of blown away by that. It's like, wow, they really are, they're really wanting to work with us. So we had that partnership in place for about 3 or 4 years before I found out that the building that is across the street from us over here, that used to house the Wingert Clinic, was owned by St. Mary's Hospital, or SSM Healthcare. And over those years that we'd had the program at St. Mary's, I got to know Dr. Frank Byrne, who was the CEO at the time. And I asked him one day what the plan was for this building. And he responded by saying, well, let me set up a meeting with you and our chief operating officer.
Tell us why you asked him the question about that building.
Because we were so crammed in our little old cheese shop that we couldn't hardly move. It was like a clown car. You'd see people coming out of that building. It was like 60, 70 people in that little building. I was very impressed by the fact that he would extend that as an offer, and that the organization would hold on to the building for as long as they did while we raised the money to purchase it, and they offered the building at less than half the appraised value. It was amazing, and the city helped us with the initial investment, and then we were able to raise the rest to actually purchase it. But then, of course, the real cost, as we all know, is in making the thing workable so that we could actually move into it. So there was a lot of resources that we had to raise that were way beyond what we'd ever raised before as a
Mhm.
little nonprofit organization. And it really was because we had established this great relationship with St. Mary's, and I had no idea that was
Yeah.
gonna, result in that.
So it was a programmatic relationship or partnership.
Yeah.
That just became the gateway to this building acquisition. for
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
And either of you have had a programmatic relationship that led to something unanticipated that was just wonderful, whether overnight or over a period of years? We'll see
I'm
Jeff for
sure.
more insight in how you can orchestrate that.
We have so many partnerships, it's hard to call out any one, and I haven't been in my role long enough to know the origin of all of them.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think of like Nesby, which is the basketball league partner that we have. We have so many families that come in, and that partnership is part of, support through Dane County that we've gotten, and essentially like we've collaborated with them to secure that support, which has been wonderful. But I mean, but that has been around for a long time. I don't know how it started. I need to know now. Find that story. to see.
Okay.
I can think of one example that was a recent one. So we started a home delivery program that goes to home-based daycares where we deliver monthly a package of books and materials to these home-based daycares
Mhm.
of early childhood books. And during COVID, we had Union Cab taking these packages to each of the daycares. But then we developed a partnership with Madison Reading Projects so that they're using their vehicle to take our packages to all these home-based daycares on a monthly
Mhm.
basis. So like that partnership kind of blossomed into something more where they could help with the delivery and save us the expense of having to pay for a Union Cab to do the
Mm.
delivery service.
And it's very consistent with their mission,
Yes,
right? Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
So
good.
like that's kind of one example I can think of off the top of my head
Mhm.
where a partnership kind of blossomed into something more. I mean, it saves the library a little bit of money or a little bit of private money, so it's not nearly as substantial as Jeff's example. But the Wisconsin Book Festival is also another example where
Mhm.
the Wisconsin Humanities Council, who worked with the library for many years, decided to give up the festival and approach the library about taking it over.
Right.
Now that actually added expense on our side, so it's really the opposite of what Jeff is talking to, because that's all privately. We agreed, for the duration to raise money to support the Wisconsin
So
Book
what
Festival.
was the positive outcome for the
The
library?
positive is we were opening Central Library at the exact same
Mhm.
time
Mhm.
that they were asking for us to consider this. And there's kind of no better example than using our third floor and our public space up on the third floor to showcase international authors from all over the world in our central library space.
Mhm.
So I think it was more like again, kind of the evolution of what libraries are. And just taking advantage of the facility that we'd spent so much time raising money for and using it in this iconic way.
Well, speaking of iconic things, it's pretty iconic the way the Library Foundation has succeeded in raising and sustaining major gifts. Talk about that for a moment. It's because to some of us, it sounds intimidating, major gifts.
It's my favorite part.
Okay, I know.
But I think what I walked into 12 years ago was a lot of donors. There were 3,000 to 4,000 donors who were making $35 gifts, $50 gifts, $100 gifts. And so we had a good quantity of donors.
Mhm.
And I felt very fortunate to kind of walk into that situation. But I think there were opportunities where those donors had the capacity to give a lot more.
Mhm.
And so I think it was really, honestly, the capital campaign for Central Library, I think was so inspiring to so many people. I think it had such a long and somewhat beleaguered history of different designs at different parts of downtown and different stories that went with it. So to finally kind of bring that to fruition and use that as an opportunity to get major donors engaged with the library and give them something fantastic
Mhm.
and iconic
Mhm.
to live with for all these years. Just kind of changed the playing field for how we dealt with donors. So it was really having an opportunity to do that. And then, you know, honestly, all these 12 years, we've kind of been in lots of capital campaigns during the course of that time. But we've also done a lot more programmatic fundraising. So I think it's just having really good opportunities that your donors just want to do more for. You know, they believe in the mission, but they want to do kind of the next thing to make something very special happen. So
Mhm.
I think it started with the campaign, but I think that really brought people to the top to say, I can give more. I believe very strongly in libraries, and keep talking to me.
Mhm.
So that there's always something else I can help make happen.
And how explicit are your asks?
I am usually very specific in my
Mhm.
asks. You know, I think that I see that as my job. You know, I ask board members to help make connections, you know, with new people and open doors. But I really see my job as to be the one to ask for specific dollar amounts.
Mhm.
And it's usually based in an overall conversation about a goal. So, you know, if we're doing a program, you know, like the bubbler, and we need, you know, a certain, you know, $30,000 to make these artist residencies happen, I usually talk about the goal, and I talk about what piece of the goal I want that donor to help make happen.
Mhm.
You know, and sometimes, you know, sometimes they do what I ask, you know, and respond that way. But occasionally, you know, I certainly have donors where they're giving to something already, and then they read a newsletter article. I mean, I think this probably happens to Jeff and probably to Dani too. And they're like, you know, I had a donor who read a newspaper article about a shoe design program that we're doing with kids in juvenile detention center. And they're like, I read about that and, you know, a newsletter article, and like, I want to fund that. So like, they were already funding that program, but they wanted to fund something more. So a lot of times those are my surprises, you know,
Yeah.
when they come back, because we wrote something up either in a newsletter or in a report that we give to the donor on an annual basis. And they're like,
Mhm.
I want to make sure more of that happens. I want to fund that creativity. So I think it's not that I never get surprised, but I'm very specific in my asks.
Well, I like the use of the phrase, you know, help make this happen. Could you help us make this happen? Rather than, could you write a check for $5,000?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so it talks about impact
Yeah.
immediately. You like that?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think it speaks to a lot of what I've seen the library being very successful in doing, and is supporting really creative projects. And I think that's one thing that we've tried to do as well in a smaller way. But looking at a specific need among our students, or a programmatic need, and then kind of figuring out how you can put those into pieces. And I'm agreeing with you when you say, you know, major gifts, that's like the thing you love to do. I love it too, because it demonstrates so much care and thought that a giver would have. Like our donors are just really astute in thinking about what kind of impact they want to have. And I love to engage with that, and just to start to think about what they can do with their money. But oftentimes what they're thinking about is, how am I changing people's lives in this community, and what's the sort of value that I'm adding to this community. So I think it's just a wonderful way to support the work that we're doing.
It's my favorite part. It's very
Jump in.
Yes, exactly.
We do.
It
It's
is.
really,
Yeah.
It's like,
because you're talking to people who really believe.
and
Yeah.
I do, I think it's the best opportunity to, I call it matchmaking. You know, it's, you know, your programs, you know, your mission, you know, what you're trying to achieve, and you have this notion of how that might happen, but you never know how it's going to happen. You just know you have to go out there and find people that like the idea of it, right?
Right.
And so when you actually get to meet and talk to them, and understand what makes them tick, and, you know, have them kind of, I like to think of it as dreaming along with us, you know, ways that it might shake out or come to fruition. I think that is like the coolest thing. That is my
Mhm.
favorite part.
Yeah.
Does it happen often enough?
there's never enough time to do as much major donor work as you want. I mean,
Yeah.
I wish there were more time in the day for everybody that does this
Mhm.
work,
Yeah.
because it is the joyful part for sure.
Right.
Well, let's talk more about what you call donor work. What is that? What is donor work?
It's coffee time. It's time to get together and have real conversation, have
Mhm.
opportunities to really get to know the people that support you and the reasons why. That's the big thing that I'm usually looking to understand is why is this person, how do they know who we are? You know, how did they get connected, but
Mhm.
also what's that relationship been over time? You know, how has that relationship evolved, especially, you know, as I mentioned earlier, new leadership, you know, what was their connection maybe to the old leadership and how can they plug in with the new leadership and what's
Mhm.
going on now? Because I think people give to people, you know, I think Don Gray was the one that
Mhm.
told me that the
Right.
first time.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true. You have to know who you're talking to and know why they're at the table, you know, because I also think that if they are willing to talk to you, that's always a good sign. That means that they actually are interested to learn more about what's
Mhm.
going on. And if you can be the person to help bring them along, then wonderful.
And
And
how
it
do
may not necessarily be me either. It might
Right.
be Letitia,
Yeah.
it might be one of my, you know, staff members or even a staff person in the program.
so how do you make sure that you're not just talking to them at, you know, donation renewal time or the annual campaign or something like that, so that they feel you really do want to understand,
Mhm.
you know, why they're interested? I know you do that pretty well, Jenny. We've talked about that.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of map it as a lot of different communication methods with the same donor. So, you know, it's letting them know about updates in the program, it's giving them reports and so forth. But, you know, I think it's also honestly just knowing more about the donor.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean like doing great database research. What it means is when you walk in the meeting, you're asking about their family and their travels and their dog and their, like, I remember Greg Michaels hasn't done much fundraising and he's our library director and we were doing some meetings together. I'm like, we talk less than 10% of the time. I want you to understand that.
So you're,
Like,
you're coaching.
We are not
Yeah.
sitting there and telling them about programs for the next hour.
Uh-huh.
We are talking to them. We are learning about them. That's the purpose of this meeting. We are not sitting there giving them a diatribe about what we're doing. So
How
just
did he
like,
do? How did he do? it?
great,
Okay.
you know what I mean? But it's good to give people a framework of like,
Mhm.
we're not, you know, we're not going to talk about us, even though we are going to be asking for money,
Mhm.
you know, how many times you go somewhere, you get like a tour of the house or like,
Mhm.
I don't know, it's just, there's
Mhm.
different things that are part of getting to know donors and that relationship building. And this much of it is about asking for money and the
Mhm.
rest of it is about learning why they care about you and their engagement with the organization overall. But I think you have
Mhm.
to listen and that's why you're there.
Mhm.
And you have to see where the conversation leads
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Mm.
Rather
Yeah.
than you leading the conversation.
Right.
Good.
Right.
Jeff, you're saying right a lot, so you must have some thoughts about this too.
I do have lots of thoughts about it. I think connecting with the donor is really vital.
Mhm.
And I don't think it matters what level the donor is giving at. I have a lot of folks who are giving $100, $200 a year and have been giving that amount for 15 years
Mhm.
that I connect with. I had a conversation with a gentleman yesterday who wanted to reach out to me. I don't think I'd talked to him before, but I send him cards every once in a while, and he wanted to tell me about this neighborhood. He is 98 years old, and he knows about the golf course that used to be here. I had no idea
Mhm.
there was a
Yeah,
golf
bowling
course.
alley and a golf
Bowling alley,
course.
there's where the country club was.
Yeah.
I learned all this stuff. We had a half-hour long conversation or so, and it was wonderful. And I don't know that I'll ask for more than what he's giving right now necessarily, and it's just a matter of making sure that people feel like you are a real human being and you want to connect with them and you want to understand what they're doing in their lives, and then you can draw that connection, because the reason that he reached out was because he knew immigrants in this community, and that's
Mhm.
why he cares so much about what we're doing and Literacy Network.
Nice.
And so I find that it is important to connect with donors at all levels with that I found that there's two things that are we've built success on. It's, making those donor connections has led to a great deal of loyalty among our donors. And so when I write thank you letters, I often will write on the thank you letter, "You've been giving for 20 years. Thank you so much for all you've done over this time. You impacted lives in a profound way." So there's that piece of it that we want to recognize, but also we're seeing that people have started to give more as they, I think, are getting closer to retirement or have retired. And they are finding that they can give a little bit more. And we're one of those organizations now that has benefited from that because we've done the groundwork and we've established relationships with them and they understand what we do.
Good. One thing I like about the way you approach your donor relationships is you've mastered the use of the phrase "thanks to you" or "because of you." Could you explain that a little bit?
I stole that, Steve.
I know.
I didn't create it.
I know. I think I helped you steal it years ago. But you're using it very well. So
Thanks, yeah.
help us understand the way that phrase is being used in your fund development process.
Sure. Well, I think it's, always using that as a preface to anything that we talk about in terms of impact. That phrase "because of you" really just reminds our donors and volunteers that this work would not be possible without their support.
So a lot of people wouldn't consider that fundraising or a fund development tactic or tool, but it's one of your central themes. And you don't feel uncomfortable using it, like you're browbeating somebody and setting them up for a larger donation. You're sharing truth with them.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real fact of the budget that we, in order for us to do this work, we need to have individual contributions as well as, various grants that we receive. The individual donors have been a big part of the growth that we've experienced.
And you're hinting at something called diversity in revenue sources. You got your institutional sources, you've got your individual sources. Would either of you like to opine on or share with us some insight about how you're diversifying your revenue sources?
I mean, I'll just speak to endowments, and it's not something new, but it's something that's a big part of what we do. So when we raise our unrestricted annual fund money every year, we put 10% of whatever we raise into our general endowment fund every single year, and that's held at Madison Community Foundation.
How many years has that been operating approximately?
Probably since 98 or something.
Quite a
like
while.
that. Yeah, a long time. So I mean, I think it's at $6-7 million right now. And we also have a policy by which all bequests, unrestricted bequests, also go into that general endowment. So those like standard policies that we exercise every single year grow that endowment and provide more revenue back to the institution. And then the other thing is that we have now a endowment for every single one of our 9 libraries. And so when we build a new library like Meadow Ridge or Penny, I mean, Meadow Ridge didn't have an endowment fund when we built that new library, and now it has maybe $150,000 sitting there in an endowment fund. So each year, the librarians get together and say, we need to upholster furniture or buy new books or start a new health program because they have endowment funds. So I think in terms of diversity, it's also stability, because those endowment funds provide a great stable source of revenue for both the branches and for the foundation year after year after year.
Great. Good to hear.
I want to know how you did that. Like when you made that decision, were you part of that? You probably
No,
made
it
that
was
decision.
institutionalized before I
Okay.
got there.
That's what I just think is brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm just take the leap
I
and
know.
do it. I want to do
it's-
it.
Yeah.
That 10% like automatically going to, it's just, you could do that. I
Yeah.
mean, it's huge. I mean, so I'm gonna steal that when I'm comfortable and ready to
Yeah.
do that.
It's a good practice to try to lay the line,
But speaking to your question, Steve, about diversifying and how Goodman's approaching that right now, we just launched in August our official planned giving campaign. And of course, there's no better time like the present than, coming out of a pandemic, that people really are thinking about their mortality.
Mhm.
There's research to prove it, and just kind of rolling out the notion of planned giving this past year through a
Mhm.
couple of emails, like, we've had this amazing response. I was shocked at how quickly people were signing up. Yes, let's do, and, we haven't even kicked this thing off yet. And, I'm very pleased with, and people don't always tell you exactly what their intentions are, what, how much their estate might be valued at, or what percentage and all of that. But what we do know, it's been great. So, like, I'm super excited about it.
That's good.
Yeah, it's
And,
great.
we're just getting started. So
Yeah.
that makes me feel really good about the long-term sustainability of, we don't want to realize those gifts anytime soon, but in, the day that we do, that is going to be extremely beneficial to Goodman and our long-term
Sure.
financial. So,
Yeah.
And along the same line, tell us, Jenny, about the Library Foundation's estate planning workshop.
Yeah, we just
Yeah,
had one
But
today.
that ties right in.
No, we did. So we used to do them live and we now do them virtually, a series of workshops. And they vary, like, the point is that we're trying to build relationships with our donors, and we're doing these educational workshops. But just today, we did a kind of how to get started estate planning 101. We had over 150 or 60 people sign up for it. About 75 to 80 actually came today, but then the rest get the recording sent to them. They ask a ton of questions. They're like, we put real legal experts who are doing it for free up there to talk to them. But it's great interaction. And, I think, and we're not telling the lawyers what to say, but they say like you could put Madison Public Library Foundation in as the charitable gift. And like, I didn't tell them to say that, but boy, that was a really nice thing to say during the course of that workshop. So,
Does that mean you're inviting them back to present next time?
Actually, one of them serves, we have a planned giving committee that she serves on, but anyway, I think it just keeps people thinking. And like, we do a donor survey once a year, and we also always ask that question in the donor survey of whether we're included in their estate plan or whether they want to talk to somebody about their estate plan. So like, you got to keep surfacing it in a lot of different places as you kind of put it out there as, something to do. So I think it's a continual point.
It's funny, we just launched, so the campaign, the planned giving campaign that we launched is the Love and Legacy campaign.
The what?
It's called the Love and Legacy campaign.
Love and Legacy or 11 Legacy?
Love.
Love and Legacy. Okay, got it.
And the first workshop that I held, because I had a volunteer who was willing she wanted to present on this, and I was like,
Yeah.
great. But it was how to prepare an obituary.
Oh, yeah.
And it was kind of a strange, I remember when she presented the notion, I was like, huh.
Uh-huh.
But it's like, let's see what happens. And we had this amazing response. I was hoping like we'd get 20 people. We had 50 something people that registered, and only half of them show, but it's like we had 25, 30 people there. And I was just amazed, like on how to write an obituary. But if you've ever had to write one, it's not a piece of cake. So it's
Especially your own.
Yeah.
so right. But you could be writing for yourself or anyone else. But I was kind of really plugged me into this notion of providing a service to the community. And by the way, if Goodman's part of your plan, even better.
Right. So it's not a blatant ask at all. It's nuanced, and it's in the context of adding value to your community. Okay, got it. So speaking of adding value, I want to do a quick time check. We are approaching 4:30 Central Time. And at that point, we're going to open it up for Q&A, including from our in-person audience, who have very gallantly avoided the suites that are in the back of the room. And those of you who are on our virtual connection, submit your questions in the chat, and Mary Beth will lead us through those. But so we'll give you a few minutes to do that. Meanwhile, I just want to ask the question, how do these other activities and events like estate planning workshops and how to write an obituary and so on, how do they relate to fund development? You've been listening to a lot of this. What would you say the connection with fund development is?
For planned giving, it's really about the long-term sustainability of whatever you're doing, of your work. we launched a planned giving campaign earlier this year and had a really great response. And it was, most of the people that I contacted said, oh yeah, you've been in my will for a year or two or whatever, maybe even longer. So that was a pretty easy sell. But we were able to document that. So we had an initial group of about 15 people or couples that had said they had us in their will. But then we had reached out to a whole bunch more, and we're still, getting some responses here and there. So it's just long-term sustainability of the work. And I love the idea of making sure that any bequest that you receive goes into the endowment. So I jotted that idea
There you
down.
go.
I think that's a really good idea.
I love it when panelists take ideas from each other.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
so cool.
Well, it's always a surprise. You're never
Mhm,
anticipating X dollar amount. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think if you could take those surprises and build them for the long term.
Yeah.
Speaking of surprises, Dani, what's the next challenge in terms of fund development that the Goodman Community Center is going to be tackling?
In terms of diversifying, thinking of diversity beyond dollars, or beyond like revenue streams, but doing a better job of like tapping into a diverse donor base. My goal is to make sure that our donor base is every bit as diverse as our participant base. So that we're serving everyone in the community, but also engaging everyone in the community in giving, and supporting Goodman. Because I think that will be the ultimate test of how much the community trusts us, with their resources and their support. And so that's kind of the new frontier for me. I'm really interested in learning and absorbing as much about community-centric fundraising, which is a new evolving kind of movement here. I think it originated in Seattle, but it's, there's our AFP chapter here in Madison is really talking about it, which is exciting. So that's kind of my interest in terms of the new frontier. I think, finding ways that we diversify our donor pool, frankly. I think it's really important. And
It's also good to hear that the AFP folks are looking at that as well. So I'm sure you get a lot of insight and ideas from your fellow fund development specialists. Good. Next challenge for Literacy Network, aside from filling your vacancy when you leave at the end of the year.
Well, we are, we're looking ahead to expanding the space that we occupy. We rent out a portion of our building, so we're hoping to be able to expand into that space.
Okay.
We also have a great opportunity with the new library, the Imagination Center. So we're really looking forward to possibility of having a presence there, because just as you talked about it being a library desert, it's also an area where there's a high number of English language learners that are taking advantage of our services, but they're not able to get to our location that easily. So that's another challenge. And of course, I think a lot of organizations are looking at how do we serve people moving forward, coming out of lockdown and doing all of our programming virtual. And we now have about 50% of what we do is a virtual offering. And that's going to be probably the new norm for us moving forward, because we've learned that it's more convenient for people who don't have childcare or transportation to take a class on Zoom, and they love it. So just maintaining that accessibility is one of the challenges that I think we're going to have. An opportunity as well, just to make sure that we can serve the community as best we can.
I love the way you're looking at the larger community and that neighborhood and so on, rather than just operating in your own silo when it comes to future plans.
Yeah,
So,
no, absolutely. I mean, I think we've done our staff has done a really great job of connecting to a lot of different initiatives going on in the community and making sure that we can have, a resource in all different areas where we're needed.
That's great. And at the library, biggest challenge faced in terms of fundraising the next couple of years?
I think it's the Imagination Center out at Rindle Park. So
Okay.
it's going to be a significant capital project that we'll be working on. in the neighborhood of about $5 million of private sources, and then about $12 million of public sources towards that project. So
Mhm.
I think that'll be a great project, and I hope whoever steps into my job will
Mhm.
enjoy it as much as I would have.
Right. So Jenny is referring to the fact that in a couple of months, she'll be the new executive director of the Oscar Rennebaum Foundation. So you're going to be a funder.
It's gonna be
So
fun.
as a funder, Jenny Jeffress, soon to be at the Rennebaum Foundation, what things would you look for in a request from an organization, a community organization?
You know, I don't think it's so different from being on this side.
Mhm. Tell us about that.
I think it's still about building a relationship with the people that you work with. You know, I think as a donor in the community, you know, I think we care about the community and we want to find ways to lift it up, and we want to find ways to solve problems.
Mhm.
And I think just building a relationship and having conversations about how we can do that together, and what are the things we can change and fix, and what are the things that, you know, are going to be
Mhm.
ongoing barriers,
Mhm.
it's just part of what we'll do. So I think I still see it as building relationships and building ongoing conversations, that it's not just an ask and a gift and then we
Mhm.
don't hear from you for a year, but that
Mhm.
it's ongoing, you know, problem solving, collaborative relationship between donor and, you know, community member as an ongoing effort together.
Perfect. It's like a problem-solving partnership. And
So you say that so well.
well, I'm just making
You
it up
could have
now.
answered
I'm just making it up now. But there is, I'm a funder and a fundraiser. And there's an emerging trend in private philanthropy to partner with your, you know, nonprofit partner organizations in collaboratively tackling or addressing a community issue. And it becomes two-way instead of one way. So I'm glad to hear you're thinking in that direction. I would expect no less from you.
Mhm.
Dani, if you were a funder and you had millions of dollars to give away every year in the hometown that you love, what would you look for from applicants and people who want your attention and your money?
I would look for, how much was their heart in it? How much experience do they have doing this work?
Mhm.
Who are they bringing to the table as far as like who are their counterparts, their collaborators?
Mhm.
Because nobody can do, this work's too hard to do by yourself.
Yeah.
So you've got to have other people jumping into the deep end with you. So that much I do know. So I think it is about, you know, who they know, but also like, how do they really have their handle on the problems that they're trying to solve? Like
Mhm.
how, you know, are they tackling it smartly? And if not, how can I collaborate with them, or, you know, as a funder, help them collaborate with other people that know those people that
Good.
can help solve.
Yeah, when I was a funder, I always called it, you know, who else is in your sandbox, and who you're playing and working with. So if you were a funder, Jeff, what would you look for? And then we're going to turn it over to questions.
Sure. Well, I think you want to have a very clear plan, first off, and that your plan includes what is the impact that you're having? How are you connecting with other organizations that might be doing similar work?
Mhm.
How are you leveraging your resources wisely and efficiently? And how are you strategizing for kind of the long-term success for this program? So is it just a one-year project, or do you have a vision for how this thing is going to continue for the next
Wow.
5 or 10 years?
Wow, good. Well, speaking of continuing, we can continue with questions from our in-person audience and our chat room folks. Do we have anybody from the chat room asking questions? Not
I
yet.
was gonna suggest that, since we don't have any questions in the chat, like awaiting our attention, I think that if folks from the Zoom audience would like to raise their hand in Zoom, and just Michaela can let us know, and we can actually cue you to come on, that would maybe be a nice way for us to all engage in real time.
Okay,
Do any of you here in the in-person audience have a question you'd like to ask right away?
Sure, I'll ask one.
hi Casey.
Hi, everyone. My name is Casey Okers. I work at the Madison Symphony Orchestra. And I'm wondering if one of you or each of you could just touch on the importance of building a culture of philanthropy at your organization so that you as the person who's like in charge of the fundraising is not the only one who is talking about this with anybody.
Good question. So for those who may not have heard it, it's about building a culture of philanthropy at your organization. Who wants that one? Go ahead.
It's funny because I, in working as development director in different organizations over my career, I've had, you know, some organizations that's just kind of built into the way things go and everybody participates and whether you're talking about actual workplace giving versus just workplace understanding that we are all part of the development work. You know, that's the way I look at it. So I actually like calling it, rather than culture of philanthropy, I've subscribed to this notion of culture of gratitude. Just because it kind of takes away the mystery of philanthropy and what is that, but really we're all here because we care and want to steward this thing that we are all passionately interested and engaged with. And so so that's kind of maybe, to me, it's about framing it for folks because they're, you know, development continues as much as we try. Development is the most mysterious part of the work. You know, so I think it's important that staff members kind of understand their role. And I think the best thing you can do is just invite them to be part of it on a regular basis, like whether that's giving tours of a facility or, you know, bringing them with you on a donor visit on occasions if it's the right appropriate thing to do. I think it's just about connecting those people and connecting the dots because it is mysterious until you make it not mysterious.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, so we actually have an all staff day for all library staff on Thursday. And like COVID kind of screwed that up for a couple of years, but I literally make a little presentation at this all staff day talking about where unrestricted donations go, like the grants it funded that are happening in the libraries or the professional development. So I do think it has to be an educational process because in our institution, there's public money and there's private money and they don't all know where money came for to pay for whatever is going on. So I do think it's like our responsibility to share the different things that it makes possible in our libraries so that when people ask or when it comes up, that they're educated about how private money kind of weaves its way in to the things they do at the library.
So you're giving them a line of sight to philanthropy, which they may not recognize is actually part of their day-to-day work anyhow, or that they have a connection to it without calling themselves fundraisers or fund developers. And I think we found that in some organizations that the more you give the employees a line of sight to how the money is raised and how it is used, the more they start thinking of themselves as part of that equation without necessarily thinking of themselves as fundraisers. And it can be a healthy bit of chemistry. Anything to add to help
Yeah,
Casey
I think
understand that?
the most important thing that we've done is engaged our staff and volunteers, and in some cases donors in the process of telling the story. So it could be individual stories of success. I think we have a list starting back in probably 2014 of about 400 stories that were submitted by staff. Based on just, you know, having a Google form, you can just go here at the end of the semester, you know, list your stories, and we pick from those things very regularly. I put them in my board reports. We put them out on social media. We get permission, of course, from everybody whose story is told. We often accompany them with photographs of the students, and it's just such a it's a real community effort because, you know, of course, no one person could generate all that stuff, but we have so much of it that we're able to lean on for various other communications that it feels like we're swimming in this great pool of wonderful stories. So that's how our staff are contributing towards that culture. And then it also kind of feeds on itself too. So when a student sees a story of their classmate, they want to have their story told as well. And it also goes into the work that we do every spring with our Reading Between the Wines event, where we have a book of student writing. That book keeps getting bigger because more students want to participate in it.
Nice. Does that help, Casey?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for the question.
I was gonna say, I know I'm not a panelist, but I actually feel like on this one, working at the School of Human Ecology with Dean Soyan Shim has provided me some good illustrations of this. The one answer to this question, which is of course in a higher ed environment, which is pretty distinguishable from a frontline organization, but Dean Shim always says, I will meet the goal of the fundraising, but you're the ones doing the work and I need you to be engaged in that process. And the way that she does that is, you know, she allows the faculty and staff in the school to be the experts on the work that we're doing. And so if a donor has, or an alum has an alumna or an alumni, I always forget how to do that, has interest in a particular part of our mission, and they're making a visit, then she'll bring those people together to like have the conversation and get to know each other. They can be the content area experts. And then one other thing that I think that she's done that's been really nice is allow then those relationships to sort of go on, even if it's not official. So like, she'll make a suggestion like, oh, make sure that that person knows about this program going on. And we'll have relationships with those people. And it becomes a little bit more of a community feeling. And then a simple tactic that the school has done is at our all school retreat, have like 15 minutes where everybody writes a thank you card to somebody. And so they have the list well organized and everything. But it's like you write it as a member of the team. That's like, you know, this is what I do in the school, and I really appreciate that you supported our work. And I think that's also really tangible, I think, for the staff. Kind of like you were saying, you know, that this is where it comes from, and it demystifies it a little bit.
Right.
I think it's about trust too, because that's what it sounds like Dean Shim does a good job of just being you're part of it.
Mhm.
So there's no mystery. It's you're trusted to represent that program as well as you can because you're the best person to do it, you know. And I think that's a big deal. If I'm a staff person and being asked to cater my time to this donor, who's this person, and like, you know, I think there's some leverage there that like needs to be recognized on both sides of that. And I think that is a big deal. I think speaking from experience, I had moments early in my career where I tried really hard to curate the, you know, best donor engagement, best laid plans, right? So trying less to make something magical happen and just let the magic happen. I think it's a good way to approach it.
Do we have any magic in the audience for questions? More questions?
I can ask one other one that I brought up at a previous session, but would love to hear from this set of brilliant panelists. My name is Kelly Douglas, and I work with Health Poverty Action USA. And one of the big focuses for us, is full cost recovery, and especially in kind of our budget writing, looking at how are we capturing and reflecting to our institutional funder partners, to our trust and foundation partners, the true costs of a project. And just wondered if this is a kind of a similar conversation at your organization, and if you had any kind of light bulbs or anything that you found incredibly helpful. If you are discussing this, what have you found helpful in kind of implementing this in your organization?
So quantifying the actual cost of an initiative or a project that you're asking a funder to support.
Correct. And so including all relevant overheads and all kind of the true costs of the project, so that where I think, you know, historically we've cut ourselves a little short in the efforts of probably trying to appear too lean or not capturing all the overhead costs associated with the project. So I'm wondering if people are having these discussions and what those discussions are and what you found to be useful.
I had that conversation yesterday with a potential grantor. So we had put together a comprehensive budget for one of our programs that demonstrated what the gap was. And it included I think it included all the relevant overhead. There might have been some things that we didn't include, but I think we were pretty thorough about stating the actual cost. And that is, it's kind of scary sometimes, because if you've historically undercut the cost because you want to appear to be lean, presenting a budget that demonstrates the actual costs can make it look like, what's going on here? Why are these costs so much higher? But we were actually able to explain that there, as we look at, retaining our excellent staff, we made a commitment last year to increase staff salaries across the board by a percentage. And that has led to very little attrition among staff. And that has meant that our programs are run very well because we have very experienced people in those roles.
And you have continuity for the students,
Yeah, exactly.
which is important.
Right. Yeah.
I have a two-part answer to that question. So we've created a, what do you call it? Like a dashboard for our programs. And because Goodman has so many programs, we have allocated overhead to all of those programs. So we have a very real understanding of the direct and indirect costs of every single program. And we're being really intentional, given all of our funders, whether that's government funding, private funding, individuals, like we are allocating, once we've raised enough money for program, we're done with that. But we're also intentionally saying, support this and, unrestricted support. We're intentionally messaging certain programs like our food programs, which always get funded like very quickly. We're intentionally saying, broadening how you can make an impact to include unrestricted support, so that we have that flexibility. And then on the other side of the equation, in terms of staffing and what it costs, we had a very exciting conversation with a group of funders just a week and a half ago. I think it's a week and a half ago, talking about living wage. And we want to do this at Goodman. We're making efforts and strides to do that, but we don't want it to just be at Goodman. We're talking to them about, we need your influence and support to help proliferate this to all of the funders in the community, because it's not just about us. Like the market is very, the high inflation, all of these things that are really messing with staffing across the whole economy. It's impacting us 10 times harder because we were already paying less than everybody else to begin with. Now we're competing with Walmart. Now we're competing with, retailers and restaurants that can pay $20 an hour, and it's so in that way, we're kind of talking about the real cost of doing business. We're saying, if you value the services that we bring to the community, we have to be able to keep people, retention and turnover is really important. And, talk about conservation of resources, invest in this and it will pay off eventually in the long term.
Good. Thanks for the question. Any other questions from our live in-person audience? Any online or the chat or people raising their hands?
Question, but we had a comment a while back of hooray for you, Jenny, about your new position.
Yeah.
That's so nice. Thank you.
It's exciting.
If I may, which we don't have a ton of time for, so maybe just, a quick sense of it. But this series has focused not only on funds development, which has been mostly what we've talked about today, which is very appropriate, but also about the notion of designing a revenue model or working on continuously a revenue model for an organization. Since I guess what we see from the Center for Community and Nonprofit Studies is there's a lot of questions coming at us about that, as well as how to actually work with donors or on specific tactics like grant writing or whatever. So I just wondered if each of you might comment a little bit. We kind of got at it with like adding in the plan giving or the notion of diversifying sources, but thinking about Goodman having fee for service stuff, probably even both of your organizations having maybe some fee for service stuff with like admissions to events or maybe some paid programs. Thinking about, grant writing and, governmental opportunities, just the whole mix. Can you just speak to how you've worked with other members of your team, if at all, on, honing the actual revenue model and like what that pie chart looks like, or what new things you see as a new opportunity, or things that are now feeling outdated and the like.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look at creating a pie that has all of those pieces. Because I don't, it can't be all events, it can't be all individuals, it can't be all corporations, I think you have to create a pie chart that has all of those things. And so I think how that is hard is many of us are very small organizations with very small number of staff working in fundraising. So being able to do every little bit of that well is very, very challenging, I think, for anybody to do. And I think very few of us have any sort of earned income models. Like I mean, when I was at the Children's Museum, is where Dani was there at a different point in time, like there's earned income, or Casey with, ticket revenue. Like there's other places where earned income is a part of the pie. But as we discovered in COVID, it's so variable that part of the pie is out the window when something kind of goes awry, or when you're doing construction, or, other things that kind of have to happen during that time. So I think just knowing that you have to kind of do a bit of everything. There's no magic model. There's nothing fancy about what we can do better. We're not all going to become venture capitalists and figure out like, we're going to take this 5,000 and we're going to, years from now, it's going to be so much more than that. There's nothing magic about it. But I think what people do have to realize, and I think anybody who's a fundraiser knows this, is the majority of our money comes from individuals. I think our boards get at us, so like, we need more corporate people, we need more this or that. And it's like, the majority of our money comes from individuals in the community who believe so strongly in what we do. And we got to continually invest time in doing that. Those are the hardest relationships to build, because they're not like Steve at CUNA, who was, picked up the phone when you wanted to talk to him, like those are harder things to do. But those are the relationships that are going to be investing the most in your organization for the long term. And you've got to put the time in to make those things, turn out the way you want, to become the Quest, or to become just long-term sustainable relationships that support your organization. So I don't think there's a magic thing. I think earned revenue is very rare for most of our organizations. I think COVID taught us, like, we want to do the least amount of events as humanly possible. We don't want to inherit back anything we don't have to, because it was a great chance to like, ooh, let's get rid of these events. So, I think, but I think you just have to invest, return on investment. And that's where the individuals are the best source of revenue for your organization. And you've got to put the time into that.
I think Tom Linfield taught me at one point, or visually, gave me this notion. He's like, Dani, I want you to do your revenue pie and how much comes from each thing. And then I want you to do where you spend your time, where you and your staff spend your time. He's like, if those don't match up, there's something wrong. And so I encourage everyone to do that, because yes, it trained me that I am going to let go of fundraising events, and we are going to embrace stewardship events, because events are necessary. You have to keep people engaged, and people plug in different ways. But to the extent that you can make it just about engaging people, and if you can raise some money, great, but don't make it like we've got to raise $1 million on that thing, because then you're going to spend all your time chasing sponsorships for that one event that's going to come and go, and then it's done, and you may or may not have met your goal, but there went all your time that you could have been doing major donors.
Wow.
Amen.
Good stuff. Do you have a follow-up question on that topic, Mary Beth?
Maybe if Jeff had anything to add.
Yeah.
Sure. All of our events are mission focused now. And that means students are speaking, people understand what we do. I inherited a run that was, had a long history, and we kept it going for a while, and then kind of just decided to stop doing it. So everything is very mission focused. And then when you think about kind of earned revenue from fee for service, we had at one time 8 different workplaces that paid for English classes that were individualized to their situation for their employees. But of course that all went away with COVID. And And so we really had to transition, and that's hard with staffing, to make sure that you have a person who's running that program. I think it's a benefit to the community to be able to do that. But when things like this happen, it may be an opportunity to kind of rethink how you're operating. And so we don't really have a whole lot of that fee for service, but the partnerships that we have with the various libraries and schools and other community partners, where there's some cost sharing, they provide some payment for it, and we bring in some outside revenue to support it. I think it's a great model, and we've developed, what does a partnership look like, and when do we invest more of our time and resources into that partnership, and when do we just decide we're going to move away from it? So that's kind of helped us to frame all of the different pieces of the puzzle that we need to put together.
Well, and speaking of framing the pieces of the puzzle, I want to thank the panel for doing that today. We need to wrap this up, and I'm going to turn it over to Mary Beth, but only after I say thank you to Jeff and Jenny and Dani for sharing your insight and thoughts with us. And I hope that for the audience, we've measured up to our goal, which was to provide you with ideas that can trigger other ideas that might work in your organization for fund development and revenue models. Mary Beth?
Thank you very, very much, Steve, and I'll echo Steve's thanks. Jenny, Dani, Jeff, amazing insights and wisdom today. I learned a lot. I hope everybody else here did too. A couple of quick housekeeping announcements, and we'll get everybody out of here right at 5 o'clock. The revenue model and funds development webinar series continues next week with the grant writing workshop. It's a longer session. If you're on the full series, you should already be able to access that. Be looking for some pre-work from us just to identify a concept to be workshopping during that workshop. We'll be emailing about that, as well as we'll be emailing about office hours with our faculty members, which will be coming up in the beginning of October, virtual office hours, if you'd like some one-on-one time with folks. And I think that does it, other than just another thanks to Jess, Don, Michaela, everybody that helped with all of the different parts of putting this together. And we'll see you all next week, and hopefully see you all in our lovely Madison community where all this great work is happening. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.